My name is Ida Townsend. I'm 29 years old. My sister used my identity and took out $89,000 in loans under my name. When I finally discovered it and told my parents, my mother looked straight into my eyes and calmly said she needed that money more than you did. Stop acting so selfish. Then my father added, if you go to the police, we'll just tell them you allowed her to do it. So I didn't go to the police. I went somewhere much worse for them. Before I tell you where that was, please take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story truly connects with you. And drop your location and local time in the comments. I always enjoy seeing where people are listening from. Now let me take you back 14 months, to the night I signed a paper that I believed was simply helping my mother. 14 months before that moment in the bank cubicle, my phone rang at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday night. My mom's name appeared on the screen. I was still in my scrubs, halfway through entering vitals for a patient on a ventilator. Ida, the landlord isn't renewing our lease. Her voice cracked in exactly the places she wanted it to. Your father's pension doesn't qualify us anywhere else. My credit, you know how bad my credit is. And I did know. My dad had retired after 32 years working as a pipe fitter, and my mom had piled up store credit cards in her 40s that she never managed to pay off. Their credit score floated somewhere below 520 most of the time. What do you need from me, Mom? I asked. Just your name on the new lease. Same apartment. Same rent. I wouldn't ask if there was another option. The following Saturday, I drove 2 hours to their place. When I walked in, Daphne was already sitting at the kitchen table. She was wearing heels, a blouse, and full makeup even though it was only 9 in the morning. She hugged me like we were meeting after years apart. I'll handle the copies, she said, sliding my driver's license and social security card out of the folder I had brought. She walked down the hallway to Mom's printer. Later that afternoon, I signed the lease at the landlord's office. Name, date of birth, social security number, employer, salary. Everything someone would need to become me on paper. In the parking lot, Daphne handed my folder back to me. All set, sis. I remember her phone was in her other hand, the screen still glowing. I didn't think anything of it. She was family. You don't investigate family. On the drive home, I checked my credit score the way I always did on the first day of every month. I had earned every single point of that number, 6 years of perfect payments, low credit usage, no collections, no missed bills. I took a screenshot and saved it in a folder labeled House Fund. That screenshot is still on my phone. It's the final record of the life I had before my sister decided she deserved it more than I did. Let me explain something about Daphne. She is 4 years older than me and about 5 inches taller. She's the kind of woman who walks into a room and immediately becomes the center of it. At every family gathering, every church potluck, every Thanksgiving dinner, Daphne would arrive last and somehow still be the person everyone noticed first. Mom introduced us the exact same way every time. This is my oldest daughter, Daphne. She works in real estate. Pause. Smile. Pride. Then almost like an afterthought, she'd add, and this is Ida. She's a nurse. Just a nurse. Just a nurse. Like I spent my nights emptying bedpans instead of keeping people alive on ventilators at 3 a.m. Daphne played her role perfectly. She brought Mom a designer purse for her birthday. She took everyone out to dinner at that Italian restaurant in the next town over, the one with cloth napkins and candles on the tables. She always grabbed the check with a dramatic flourish, sliding her credit card across the table like she was closing $1 million deal. I never asked where the money came from. I should have. Here's what I knew that no one else did. 2 years before the lease signing, Daphne called me at 2 in the morning, crying so hard she could barely breathe. A client had filed a complaint against her. She sold them a house, but didn't tell them about a cracked foundation. The State Real Estate Commission opened an investigation. 3 months later, her license was suspended. She begged me not to tell anyone. Mom would be devastated. Ida, please. So I kept her secret for 2 full years. I watched her keep posting old listing photos on Facebook like everything was normal. I watched Mom brag about her successful real estate daughter at Sunday brunch. And I stayed quiet because that's what I did in this family. I kept things running smoothly and I kept my mouth shut. I'll explain later why that matters so much. Because it does. You need to understand what I had been working toward all those years. Otherwise, the rest of this story just sounds like numbers. 6 years. That's how long I had been saving for a down payment on a house, not some fantasy mansion. I'm not that unrealistic. Just a small 2-bedroom house with maybe a patched roof and a backyard that needed mowing. Listed at $165,000 in a neighborhood where the streetlights still worked and you could sit on the porch at night and hear nothing but crickets. I had done the math over 100 times. $28,000 for the down payment and closing costs. I could tell you exactly how many night shifts went into saving that money. Every Christmas shift I worked so someone else could be home with their kids. That was another $400 saved. Every time I packed my lunch instead of buying food from the hospital cafeteria, $8 saved. Every canceled streaming subscription, every declined happy hour invitation. Every January when I told myself I didn't really need a new winter coat, $28,000 sitting in a high-yield savings account that I checked every Sunday morning the way some people check their horoscopes. I scheduled my meeting with a loan officer on a Wednesday, my usual day off. His name was Craig. I ironed a blouse. I printed my pay stubs. I drove to the bank 20 minutes early and sat in the parking lot rehearsing absolutely nothing because I didn't think there was anything to rehearse. My credit score was 780. My debt-to-income ratio was perfect. This was supposed to be the easiest approval of my life. One thing I should mention, though, the week before that appointment, I received a phone call from an out-of-state number. A woman asked me to confirm a recent personal loan application. I told her she had the wrong person and hung up. I assumed it was a scam call. It wasn't. Craig's cubicle smelled like coffee and carpet cleaner. There was a framed photo of his family on the desk, 2 kids and a golden retriever. He shook my hand, opened my file, and started typing on his computer. Then he stopped. He stared at the screen for a long time, too long. The kind of silence that slowly changes the temperature in a room. "Miss Townsend," he finally said, "can I ask if you've recently opened any new credit accounts?" "No." He turned his monitor toward me. I saw the number before my brain understood what it meant. I stared at it the way you stare at a car accident happening in your own driveway. Your brain understands what you're seeing, but your body refuses to accept it. "That can't be right," I said. "I was at 780 last month." Craig slowly scrolled down the report. His voice sounded like someone delivering bad medical news. 4 credit cards, 2 personal loans, all opened within the last 14 months at financial institutions in cities you've never visited. He paused. Total outstanding balance, $89,214. My hands grabbed the edge of the chair. I gripped it until my knuckles started to ache. "Ma'am," he asked carefully, "did you open these accounts?" "No." "Do you have any idea who might have?" I didn't answer, because the answer was already forming in my chest like a clenched fist. And if I said it out loud in that small cubicle, it would become real. The lease, the copies, Daphne's glowing phone screen in the parking lot. Craig printed the report and says, lit it across the desk toward me. You need to file a police report today. I drove home with that paper sitting on the passenger seat. I folded it once so I couldn't see the number anymore, but I didn't call the police. I called my mother. She answered on the second ring. I told her everything. The bank meeting, the credit score, the accounts, the $89,000. I kept my voice steady because if it started shaking, I knew I wouldn't be able to keep talking. When I finished explaining, the line went silent, not confused silence, not shocked silence. It was the quiet sound of someone waiting for a storm they already knew was coming. Your sister told me she borrowed your credit, Mom said calmly. She said you knew about it. The room felt like it tilted sideways. I didn't know, Mom. She stole my identity. Don't say that word. She's your sister. She forged documents. She needed the money more than you do, Ida. You have a stable job. You get a paycheck every 2 weeks. She's been struggling. Stop acting so selfish. Selfish. $89,000 of debt chained to my name like a concrete block. And somehow I was the selfish one. I hung up the phone. I sat on my kitchen floor for 11 minutes. I know the exact time because I kept staring at the microwave clock. Then I called Dad. He answered on the 5th ring. His voice sounded thin and careful, like he was reading from something prepared in advance. Ida, if you go to the police, I'll tell them you gave her permission. Dad, you know that's not true. Your mother and I already talked about it. We need to keep this in the family. His voice didn't sound like his own voice anymore. It sounded practiced, controlled, like someone had written the words on a piece of paper and made him repeat them until he said them right. Because someone probably had. I placed the phone on the kitchen counter. I looked down at the printed report from the bank. Then I looked back at my phone, and in that moment I understood something with a clarity that felt like cold water running down my spine. This wasn't a family that had made a mistake. This was a family that had made a plan. My mother moved quickly, much faster than I expected. Within 2 weeks, she had already started making calls, not to me, to everyone around me. Aunt Patrice, the women from her Bible study group, neighbors she had known for 30 years. She told them all the exact same story. It has been under a lot of pressure at work. She's saying things about Daphne that just aren't true. We're worried about her. The first message came from Aunt Patrice on a Thursday afternoon. Honey, your mama is worried about you. Maybe you should talk to someone. Talk to someone. She meant a therapist. She meant your mother told me you're losing control, and I believe her. Then Daphne posted something on Facebook. A photo from 2 Christmases ago. The 4 of us standing around the tree. Mom in her red sweater. Dad holding the carving knife. Daphne and me standing shoulder to shoulder. The caption said, "Family sticks together no matter what." 43 likes, 7 heart reactions, and a comment from Mom, "My girls always." I read it while sitting in the hospital break room and felt something tighten behind my chest, like a stitch pulling itself closed. In a small town, reputation works like currency, and my mother had started spending mine. At the grocery store, Linda from the church choir smiled too widely and asked how I was really doing. At the gas station, Mr. Garner, who had known my father for 40 years, looked at me the way people look at someone collecting cans by the roadside. Pity mixed with distance. I was slowly turning into the family problem, the difficult daughter. One who tells lies. There was one person in this family who wouldn't call me crazy, but I didn't know that yet. Her name was Ruth. And 10 years earlier, she had stood exactly where I was standing. I kept thinking about that phone call from the week before my bank appointment. The one from the out-of-state number. The woman asking me to confirm a personal loan application. I scrolled back through my call history until I found it. Area code 614. Ohio. Before I could talk myself out of it, I pressed call. Federated Lending Group. How may I direct your call? Someone called me last week about a personal loan under my name, I said. I didn't apply for any loan. 20 minutes and 3 transfers later, I was speaking with a fraud specialist named Dawn. She confirmed it. A $12,000 personal loan had been opened using my social security number, my birth date, and a mailing address I didn't recognize. A P.O. box located about 40 minutes south of where I lived. That same night, I requested my complete credit report through annualcreditreport.com. When the report finally loaded, I had to read it twice because my hands wouldn't stop shaking. 6 different accounts had been opened over 14 months, not all at once, one account every 2 or 3 months. They rotated between lenders in different states. The amounts were small enough each time that automated fraud alerts wouldn't immediately trigger. Whoever did this understood exactly how the system worked. The mailing address listed for every account was the same P.O. box. Every statement, every letter, every late notice, all of it went there. I never received a single piece of mail. Then I saw the date on the very first account, a credit card with an $8,000 limit, approved 3 days after I signed that lease for Mom. 3 days. She hadn't taken my information by accident. She hadn't led into it. Daphne had walked into my mother's kitchen that Saturday morning with the plan already built. The lease had been the lockpick. My social security number was the door. And my mother's desperate phone call at 11 on a Tuesday night? I'm not even sure that was real anymore. Marcus noticed something was wrong before I said anything. We were restocking the ambulance bay at the end of a 12-hour shift. It had been the kind of night where you lose 2 patients and save 1 and feel nothing about either outcome because the paperwork doesn't stop. I was labeling IV kits, quiet, my hands moving automatically. You haven't said a word in 4 hours, he said. Marcus Webb, paramedic, built like a linebacker but gentle like a librarian. We had worked the same rotation for 3 years. He knew my silence wasn't normal. I'm fine, I said. You're not. He shrugged. And you don't have to tell me what's wrong. But if you do, it stays here. So I told him everything. The lease, the accounts, the $89,000, Mom's phone call, Dad's rehearsed threat, the P.O. box. Marcus leaned against the ambulance and listened without interrupting once. When I finished, he didn't offer sympathy. He offered a name. My cousin's ex-wife went through something like this, he said. Her brother-in-law opened credit cards in her name. She used a lawyer named Karen Pute, consumer protection lawyer. Her office is over in Millfield, about 40 minutes from here. I called Karen the next morning. She answered the phone herself. Small law office, 2 paralegals, no receptionist. I gave her the short version. This is textbook familial identity theft, she said. Here's what we do, and here's what we don't do. She spoke calmly, like someone who had handled this exact situation many times before. We file an FTC identity theft report. We freeze your credit with all thra. E-bureaus. We dispute every fraudulent account, and we do not yet go to the police. Why not? I asked. Because your mother already has a counter-story ready, Karen said. If you walk into a police station right now, she'll walk in behind you and say you authorized everything. We need a file of evidence that speaks louder than her words. Then she asked a question. Is there anyone in your family who might confirm what you are saying? Anyone who has seen your mother behave like this before? I hadn't spoken to Aunt Ruth in almost 10 years. But that night, I picked up my phone and dialed her number. It rang 5 times. I almost hung up on the 4th ring. Hello? Her voice was deeper than I remembered. Careful. The way people answer calls from numbers they don't recognize anymore. Aunt Ruth, it's Ida. There was a long breath on the other end, not exactly a sigh, more like the sound of a door slowly opening after being stuck. Ida, she said quietly. Oh, sweetheart. I wasn't sure I'd ever hear from you again. I hadn't called her in 9 years, not because I didn't want to, because the cost was too high. After Mom cut Ruth out of the family, even mentioning her name at the dinner table created a silence so heavy you could choke on it. Calling Ruth meant choosing a side. And in our family, choosing sides always came with consequences. I told her the facts, no drama, no opinions, just dates, dollar amounts, and the exact words Mom said on the phone. Ruth stayed quiet for a long moment. Then she said, I'm not surprised, honey, not even a little. She told me what happened 10 years earlier. She had discovered that Mom Gloria had borrowed money from the church's women's ministry fund, $800, and when the money went missing, Mom blamed it on a bookkeeping mistake. Ruth confronted her privately. Gloria denied Ruth kept pushing. Within a month, Gloria had told every relative and family friend that Ruth was jealous because she never had children of her own and was trying to tear the family apart. Dad chose Gloria. Everyone chose Gloria. Ruth spent the next 10 years on the outside. Your mother doesn't protect family, Ruth said quietly. She protects the story of the family. And anyone who threatens that story gets erased. Then she told me something that made my stomach drop. She did it to your father, too, Ruth said, about 15 years ago. She opened a credit card in his name without telling him. He found out, but he never said a word. How do you know? I asked. Because Earl told me, Ruth said. The week before your mother made sure I disappeared. That was the moment I understood something clearly. Dad was never going to stand up. Not for me. Not even for himself. The next 3 weeks moved along 2 separate tracks. The first track was my normal life. 12-hour hospital shifts, charting patient notes, emergency codes, the non-stop machine of trying to keep strangers alive. The second track was Karen Poot's checklist, and I treated it like a second job. Monday after my first call with Karen, I filed the FTC identity theft report online. It took 40 minutes. I saved the confirmation number in 3 places: my email, a screenshot on my phone, and a printed copy inside a manila folder I kept in the trunk of my car. Tuesday, I froze my credit. Equifax, Experian, TransUnion. 3 calls, 3 security pins, 3 confirmation emails. No one would ever open another account under my name again. Not Daphne, not anyone. Wednesday through the following Friday, I prepared dispute letters. 1 for each of the 6 fraudulent accounts. Each letter included a copy of the FTC report and my notarized affidavits, a sworn statement signed in front of. A notary public at the UPS store on Elm Street, declaring under penalty of perjury that I did not open, authorize, or benefit from any of those accounts. Karen also requested copies of the original credit applications from each lender. 3 of the 6 companies responded within 2 weeks. The signatures on those applications were not mine. They weren't even close. My handwriting is small and tight. Years of writing patient charts had trained my handwriting into narrow, careful lines. The signatures on those loan forms were the opposite. They were wide, looping, and confident. Daphne's handwriting. I had seen it on birthday cards and holiday notes my entire life, but the detail that made Karen go completely quiet was on the second application. It was a personal loan for $15,000. Under the section labeled employer, someone had written Towns and Reilly. Towns and Reilly was the brokerage where Daphne had worked before her license was suspended. a company she was no longer legally allowed to represent. And there it was, listed as my employer. 3 forged signatures, Karen said slowly, and she placed you on the payroll of a company she is barred from working with. She paused. That's not confusion or a misunderstanding, Ida. That's a federal crime. The invitation arrived on a Saturday afternoon. It came inside a cream-colored envelope with gold script across the front. You were cordially invited to celebrate 40 years of love. Gloria and Earl Townsend, Sullivan's Restaurant. Saturday the 19th, 6 p.m. dinner, toasts and dancing. More than 50 guests were expected. 3 generations of Townsends, neighbors, church friends. Pastor Thompson. The women's ministry circle, Margaret Sullivan herself, the restaurant owner and chair of every committee that mattered in our town. My phone buzzed. About an hour after I opened the envelope, it was Daphne. Yo. Or coming, right? Mom really wants you there. Her voice had that honey-coated warmth she used whenever she needed something. Let's put this behind us, Ida. It's their night. Let's put this behind us. $89,000, 6 forged signatures, my credit score destroyed, let's put it behind us. I understood exactly what she was asking. Show up, smile, stand beside them for photos. Give Mom her perfect family picture in front of the entire town. If I stayed home, I would become the ungrateful daughter. The living proof of every rumor Gloria had been whispering. I'll be there, I said. Really? Oh, that's great. Mom will be so happy. I hung up and immediately called Karen. The anniversary party is in 3 weeks. I told her, I can't advise you to create a scene, she replied calmly. But I can tell you that every document is in order. Your FTC report is filed. Your disputes are active. Your affidavit is notarized and dated. Thank you, Karen. Then I called Ruth. I know about the party, she said before I could finish explaining. I'm doing the flowers. Your mother hired me because I'm the only florist in town. She would rather swallow broken glass than use the shop in Millfield. She laughed quietly. I'll be there setting up from 4 o'clock. If you need me, I'll be nearby. I didn't have a revenge plan. I had something simpler and worse. I had the truth in their own words. Karen had mentioned it casually during our second call. Just so you know, she said, our state allows one-party consent recordings. That means if you're part of the conversation, you can legally record it without telling the other person. 2 weeks before the party, I drove to my parents' house on a Tuesday evening. I told Mom I wanted to talk one last time face to face. No speakerphone, no dad reading from a script. Gloria opened the door, wearing her bathrobe. Earl was sitting in his recliner with the television on low volume. Daphne wasn't there. I sat at the kitchen table. My phone was in my jacket pocket. The voice recorder was already running. I placed my hands flat on the table so they wouldn't shake. Mom, I said quietly, I'm giving you one last chance. Tell Daphne to pay back what she took. Help me repair my credit. I won't go to the police. Gloria crossed her arms. You're still going on about this? She forged my signature on 6 accounts. She borrowed your name. Families do that. She took out $89,000. Mom, well, if she did, it's because she was desperate. You don't know what it's like to struggle. If she did, not she didn't. If she did, my mother knew about every dollar. She had known from the beginning. I looked at Dad. He stared at the carpet between his slippers. Gloria leaned across the table. Her voice lowered into something cold and exact. If you bring this up at the party, I will make sure everyone in this town knows what kind of daughter you are. I stood up. I picked up my jacket, and I walked out without saying another word. In my car, with the engine still off, I played the recording. Every word was clear. She borrowed your name. If she did, I will make sure everyone knows what kind of daughter you are. Mom had just handed me the match. She didn't even realize the microphone had been running the entire time. I need to pause the story here for a moment because I know some of you listening are probably yelling at your screen right now. Just go to the police, Ida, and I understand that reaction. I really do. But here is the thing. People rarely talk about when it comes to identity theft inside a family. When your own mother is willing to lie to the police for your sister, when the entire town already believes you're unstable because your mode, her spent 2 weeks planting that story. Walking into a police station doesn't feel like justice. It feels like stepping into another trap. Karen told me something during one of our calls that I will never forget. The legal system will handle the debt, she said, but the court of public opinion is where your mother lives. That's where the truth needs to land. And she was right. In a small town, what people believe about you on Monday morning matters more than what a detective writes in a report on Friday afternoon. So here's my question for you. If your own family had already turned the neighborhood against you, and you had a recording of your mother basically admitting she knew about everything, what would you do with it? Would you take it straight to the police? Would you save it for a courtroom? Or would you wait for the moment when it would matter the most? Tell me what you would do. I genuinely want to know. And to the night shift listeners out there, I see you. Drop a comment if you're hearing this at 2 a.m. I've worked enough overnight hospital shifts to know that stories sound very different at that hour. All right. Back to the story. The party was 2 weeks away, and Daphne still had one more lie she didn't realize I could prove. To explain it, I have to go back 2 years, because what I'm about to tell you is the one thing Daphne feared more than anything else. More than the debt, more than the forged signatures, more than any investigation. It was a Wednesday night at 2 in the morning when my phone lit up. Daphne was crying so hard I could barely understand her words. They're suspending my license. She explained that a family had bought a house through her. 3 months after closing, they discovered cracks in the foundation, serious structural damage she had known about but failed to disclose. The buyers filed a complaint with the State Real Estate Commission. The investigation lasted 90 days. The result, license suspended, effective immediately. If Mom finds out, Daphne sobbed, she'll never look at me the same way. You know how she is. Please, please don't tell anyone, and I didn't. For 2 years, I watched my sister attend family dinners wearing blazers and talking about the market. I watched her post old listing photos on Instagram with captions like "another happy buyer." I watched Mom glow with pride every time someone asked about Daphne's career. It was all a performance. Every brunch, every holiday, every casual mention of a closing, a fiction. Daphne hadn't earned a real estate commission in more than 2 years, but the shoes still cost $200. The handbags still cost $400. The restaurant dinners kept happening. And as I now understood, many of them were charged to my name. She ran out of her own credit first, around $40,000 in personal debt. Then she found a new source. Me, my name, my future, my 780 credit score. I kept her secret for 2 years. She used my identity for 14 months. That's the math of my family. And here's the thing about a real estate license suspension. It's public record. Anyone can search it. But nobody in my family ever questioned Daphne. Nobody ever looked it up. But someone at that party would. 3 days before the anniversary celebration, Daphne called again. Her voice sounded cheerful and relaxed, like nothing in the world was wrong. "I'm writing a speech for Mom and Dad," she said, "about family values, about loyalty, about how they raised us to be honest." She laughed. The kind of laugh that sounded practiced. I might cry. "Just warning you. Sounds great, Daph." Do you want to add anything? Maybe we could do a joint speech? No, I said. Your speech. Your moment. Okay, good. Oh, and I found the Mo. So beautiful dress, navy blue, $400, but it's their 40th anniversary, you know? You only get one $400. I could practically calculate which credit card that purchase had landed on. I knew the account numbers by heart now. Later that evening, Mom called. Her tone was short and sharp. Wear something nice, Ida, and smile. I don't want people asking questions. After a 10-hour shift that night, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open and spread everything out in front of me. The FTC identity theft report, printed and highlighted, credit freeze confirmations from all 3 bureaus. My notarized affidavit, copies of the forged signatures placed next to my real signature from my nursing license renewal, and the recording. I didn't prepare a speech. I didn't write some dramatic expose. Instead, I opened a box of plain white envelopes. Inside each one, I placed a single sheet of paper, a typed summary, just facts, no emotion, a timeline of events, the account numbers, the FTC report reference number, and at the bottom, a short note. Then explain this. I picked up the first envelope and slid it across the table toward Margaret Sullivan. Her name was written on the front in blue ink. Margaret looked at the envelope like it might burn her fingers. Finally, she opened it slowly. Inside was a copy of the credit report with every account highlighted. 4 credit cards, 2 personal loans, all opened under my name. Margaret's eyes moved across the page, then lifted slowly toward Daphne. The room stayed silent. I picked up the second envelope and handed it to Pastor Thompson. He opened it carefully. Inside were the transaction records. Thousands spent on travel, restaurants, clothes, and a $400 navy dress purchased from a boutique downtown. The same dress Daphne was wearing right now. Pastor Thompson read quietly for a seconds. His expression changed, not angry, just disappointed. The kind of disappointment that weighs more than shouting. The third envelope went to Aunt Patrice. She slid the paper out and looked at the printed emails between the credit card companies and me. Every message where I reported fraud. Every response saying the accounts were verified using personal information only my family would know. Aunt Patrice pressed her lips together and looked toward my mother. The fourth envelope went to Uncle Jim. He unfolded the document slowly. It was the loan agreement with my digital signature forged at the bottom. Uncle Jim stared at the signature for a long moment. "That's not Ida's handwriting," he said quietly. No one argued with him. Finally, I held the fifth envelope in my hand. "This one," I said, "is for Dad." My father didn't reach for it right away. His hands rested flat on the table. He looked older than he had an hour ago, like the weight of every quiet moment over the last year had settled on his shoulders at once. I walked over and placed the envelope in front of him. He opened it slowly. Inside was the message I sent him 14 months ago. The one where I told him everything. The one where I begged him to help me fix it. Underneath that message was his reply. 3 words. "Handle it quietly." Dad read the page twice, then he folded it again and set it down. Daphne laughed softly. It sounded thin and shaky now. "You're making this into some huge drama," she said. "It's not what it looks like." "Then what does it look like?" I asked. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Mom stepped forward instead. Her voice was sharp again. "Enough of this," she said. "You're embarrassing the entire family." I looked around the room. 47 people. Friends from church. Neighbors. People who had watched us grow up. "Embarrassing the family," I repeated calmly. "Is that worse than stealing from your daughter?" Mom's face turned red. You've always been jealous of your sister, she said. Always trying to make her look bad? A few people shifted in their seats, not agreeing, just uncomfortable. Daphne crossed her arms. You could have come to me privately, she said. I did, I replied. 14 months ago. She looked toward Mom. Mom looked toward Dad. Dad stared at the table. That was the moment everyone in the room understood something important. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a secret that had been protected for a long time. Margaret Sullivan stood up slowly. Gloria, she said, her voice steady, did you know about this? Mom didn't answer right away. That recording was taken out of context, she repeated. That's not what I asked, Margaret said. Mom's silence was the loudest answer in the room. Pastor Thompson spoke next. Daphne, he said, did you open these accounts? Daphne shook her head quickly. No, Ida must have made some mistake. I pulled one last paper from my bag and set it on the table. The bank's already investigated, I said. The IP address used to open the accounts came from your apartment. Daphne's smile disappeared completely. No one spoke for several seconds. Finally, Aunt Patrice whispered, Oh my God. Daphne's voice rose suddenly. Fine, she snapped. Yes, I used her name, but I was going to pay it back. The words hung in the air like broken glass. Mom grabbed Daphne's arm. You shouldn't have said that, she hissed. But it was too late. Pastor Thompson leaned back in his chair slowly. You understand that's fraud, he said quietly. Daphne rolled her eyes. Oh, please, she said, families help each other. I recognized the sentence immediately. It was the same sentence Mom used on the recording. The room understood that T? Margaret looked from Daphne to Gloria. You threatened Ida to keep this quiet? She asked. Mom straightened her shoulders. I was protecting my family. No, Margaret said gently. You were protecting a lie. The candles on the tables flickered in the silence. Dad finally stood up again. His chair scraped loudly across the floor. He looked at me first, then at Daphne, then at Mom. I should have fixed this a year ago, he said quietly. Mom's head snapped toward him. Earl, don't you dare. But he kept speaking. Ida deserved better than silence. My chest tightened a little when he said that. Not because it fixed anything, but because it was the first honest sentence I had heard from him in 14 months. Daphne shook her head. This is unbelievable, she said. You're all acting like I committed some huge crime, Pastor Thompson answered calmly. You did. The room stayed silent again. Then Margaret Sullivan turned to me. What happens now? She asked. I took a slow breath. The accounts are already under investigation, I said. The paperwork is with my attorney. I glanced at Daphne. And tomorrow morning the banks will receive the final documentation confirming the fraud. Daphne stared at me. You wouldn't actually do that, she said. I held her gaze. I already did. Mom stepped forward again. Her voice shook now. You're going to destroy your sister's life. I shook my head slowly. No, I said. She did that when she signed my name. Someone at the back of the room exhaled loudly. The tension finally cracked. People looked at each other, whispered, shifted in their chairs. The perfect anniversary party had turned into something else entirely. But the truth was finally sitting in the middle of the room where everyone could see it. I placed the microphone back on the stand. I didn't come here for revenge, I says. Aide quietly, I came here because silence was costing me my future. No one clapped this time, they just watched. I picked up my bag, 5 empty envelopes, stayed on the table. And for the first time in 14 months, when I walked toward the door, I didn't feel like I was carrying someone else's debt on my shoulders anymore. I should have said something a long time ago, not just about this. His voice sounded smaller than I had ever heard it, like a man standing in a house after the power goes out, realizing how quiet everything really is. I didn't interrupt him. I thought keeping the peace was the same thing as doing the right thing, he continued. Your mother, she always believed problems should stay inside the family. And I convinced myself that if I stayed quiet long enough, things would work themselves out. He paused. I could hear him breathing on the other end of the line. That was cowardice, he said finally. The word hung between us, not an excuse, just a fact. I'm not calling to ask you to fix anything, he added. I know you can't. I just needed you to hear me say that I was wrong. I stood in my kitchen while he spoke, the same kitchen where I had stared at the photo of that little house with the sagging porch months earlier. The picture was still on the refrigerator. I hear you, I said. Another pause, then he said something that surprised me. Your mother is angry, he said, not the loud kind of angry, the quiet kind, the kind where she walks around the house like the furniture offended her. That sounds familiar, I said. He gave a short laugh that didn't carry much humor. She still thinks you embarrassed the family, he said. I didn't embarrass the family, I replied calmly. I told the truth. I know that now, he said. That sentence might have meant more if it had come 14 months earlier, but I let it sit thus. Here anyway, because sometimes the truth arrives late, and late is still better than never. What happens with Daphne? He asked after a moment. That's not up to me anymore, I said. The banks decide. Maybe the police. Maybe the courts. I've already done my part. He didn't argue. That house you were trying to buy? He said carefully, the one with the dogwood tree. Do you still want it? I looked at the photo on the fridge again. The listing had been sold months ago. Someone else's car probably sat in the driveway by now. Someone else's life moving into the rooms I had imagined for myself. It's gone, I said. I'm sorry. I know. We stayed on the phone for another minute without speaking much. Not every conversation needs to be long to matter. Before we hung up, he said one more thing. If you ever need help, real help this time, you can call me. I thought about that sentence after the call ended. Not because I believed everything between us was suddenly fixed, but because it was the first time in my life my father had offered support without conditions attached. That weekend, the weather turned colder, the kind of November cold that makes the sidewalk shine with frost early in the morning. I worked 2 night shifts back to back. The hospital monitors still beeped. The IV pumps still hummed. Patients still needed help getting through the night. Life didn't pause because my family fell apart in a restaurant, and strangely, that helped. Normal routines are steady ground when everything else shifts. The following Monday, I received an email from the bank handling the largest loan. After reviewing the identity theft report, the signature comparison, and the supporting documentation, they had ruled the account fraudulent. The balance was removed from my credit history effective immediately. Just like that. $22,000 of debt. T disappeared from my name. I stared at the screen for a long moment before closing the email, not because I was celebrating, because I was adjusting to the idea that my life might actually belong to me again. Over the next few weeks, the other disputes followed the same slow path. Investigations, confirmations, paperwork, removals. One by one, the accounts vanished from my report like stains being lifted from fabric. By early January, my credit score had climbed back into the 700s, 742. I checked it 3 times just to be sure. Ruth came over that evening with a small grocery bag and 2 mugs from her kitchen cabinet. Inside the bag was a cheap bottle of sparkling cider. Celebration doesn't have to be fancy, she said while pouring the drinks. We clinked the mugs together. To clean credit reports, she said. And honest aunts, I replied. She smiled at that. You know, she said, leaning back in her chair, the funny thing about truth is that people call it drama when it first shows up. And later, I asked, later they call it history. Outside the window, the street was quiet, the same small town where everyone knew each other's business by breakfast. Some of them probably still thought I had gone too far that night. Some probably believed I did exactly what needed to be done. It didn't matter as much anymore. The legal process was still moving forward somewhere in the background, papers filed, statements recorded, consequences slowly forming their shape, but my life was moving forward too. One evening in February, I opened a new listing site while sitting on my couch. I wasn't even planning to look seriously, just curiosity. A small house popped up 20 minutes outside town, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, a crooked little porch, and in the backyard stood a dogwood tree. Not the same house, but close enough to make me smile. I printed the listing and stuck it on the refrigerator with a magnet. For the first time in a long while, the future didn't look like something someone else had already taken from me. It looked like something I could still build. I listened. I didn't answer right away. After a long pause, I simply said, "Okay, Dad." Then I hung up. It was the longest conversation we had shared in 2 years, which probably tells you everything about the man who raised me. Daphne waited 10 days before she made her move. I think she believed the whole thing would fade away. Maybe she thought the town would forget, or Mom would smooth things over the way she always had. Maybe she believed the world would quietly shift back into place around her like it always did, but it didn't. She called on a Thursday night. There were no polite greetings, no sweetness in her voice. The mask she normally wore was completely gone, and what remained sounded like someone I barely recognized. "You think you won, Ida?" "This isn't about winning," I replied. "I'll call every creditor," she said sharply. "I'll tell them you approved those accounts. It'll be your word against mine, and you know I'm more convincing than you." I let her finish. I didn't interrupt her once. Then I spoke the way I do when frightened families threaten lawsuits at the hospital because they're scared and don't know where to place their anger. Calm, steady, and completely factual. "Go ahead, Daphne," I said, "but you should know a few things first. I have an FTC identity theft report already filed. It's dated and time-stamped. I have a notarized affidavit signed under penalty of perjury. I have 3 copies of your forged signatures that any handwriting examiner will confirm are not mine. And I have a recording of Mom admitting she knew what was happening." There was silence on the other end. "And one more thing," I added, "your real estate license suspension is public information now. Uncle Jim made sure of that. If you call a creditor and claim I approved those loans while listing Towns and Realty as your employer, a company you were already banned from, you won't just be defending yourself against forgery. You'll be adding another lie on top of it." The call ended immediately. She didn't say goodbye. I called Karen, my attorney, right after. She threatened to challenge my claims with the creditors. I told her. Karen didn't sound worried at all. I could hear papers moving while she reviewed the case file. "Let her try," she said calmly. "The evidence doesn't support her story, and if she files a false statement with a federally regulated lender, that becomes a separate offense. She'd be handing you another charge without realizing it. Daphne never contacted the creditors. She never filed any statement. She never called me again." That moment told me something important, not something I hoped was true, but something I knew for certain. It was over, not because she suddenly felt guilt or regret, but because she finally ran out of people willing to lie for her. Let me pause the story for a moment because many people have asked me the same question. Do you feel guilty? And the honest answer is that sometimes at 2 a.m. between shifts, when I'm lying awake staring at the ceiling, I wonder if there could have been another way. Maybe a version where I got my credit back and still kept my family intact. Maybe a version where nobody had to sit inside a restaurant listening to my mother's voice come through a speaker system. But then I remember something important. I did try another way. I went to my mother's kitchen table. I asked her to help me fix it. I asked her to help make things right. NT, she looked me straight in the eye and told me she would bury me if I said anything. The hardest part of all of this wasn't the money. It wasn't the damaged credit score. It was realizing that inside my family, the person who tells the truth becomes the problem, not the person who steals. 3 weeks after the anniversary party, I came home from a double shift at the hospital and almost stepped on something lying on the floor. A plain white envelope had been slid under my apartment door. There was no stamp and no return address. Just my name written in handwriting I had known my entire life. My father's, all capital letters slightly uneven, the way someone writes after decades of holding tools instead of pens. I sat down on the kitchen floor and opened it. Inside was a personal check for $4,200 made out to me, along with a folded sheet of yellow legal pad paper. The note said, "Ida, this won't repair your credit, but it's everything I have. I've been doing small repair jobs since I retired, fixing pipes, installing faucets, replacing water heaters. Your mother doesn't know about this account. This is all of it. I'm sorry I wasn't braver. Dad, I read the note 3 times. Then something happened that hadn't happened since the day I sat in Craig's office and saw 489 appear on the credit report screen. I cried. Not the quiet kind of crying people try to hide, the kind where your entire body gets involved, your ribs hurt, your hands shake. You can't tell if the tears are coming from grief, relief, or both. At the same time, $4,200 against $89,000. Mathematically, it meant almost nothing, but emotionally it meant everything because it was all he had, and he gave it to me without being asked. The envelope stayed on my kitchen table for 3 days. Every morning I walked past it. Every night I walked past it again. On the 4th day I called him Dad. I said gently, "I'm not cashing the check." He took a slow breath. "I understand, but I'm keeping the note." There was a long pause before he answered. "Your mother and I are going to counseling," he said quietly. The pastor helped arrange it. I didn't ask questions. I didn't push for details. "That's good, Dad," I said. Then we hung up. I taped his note to my refrigerator right next to the printed photo of the house I once wanted to buy, the 2 most honest pieces of paper in my life sitting side by side. 6 months later, my credit score is 620, not 780 like before, but every point in that number belongs to me. Every point was rebuilt slowly through paperwork, disputes, and patience. 5 of the 6 fraudulent accounts have already been removed. The last one is in its final investigation stage. Karen says it should be resolved within the next 60 days. Daphne is now facing lawsuits from 2 creditors under her own name. Debts she can't hide behind mine anymore. Her suspended license is widely known throughout the local real estate community now. Mom can't repair that with a phone call. Gloria stepped down from the women's ministry at church. She still attends services, but she sits quietly in the back row these days. Mrs. Henderson no longer saves her a seat. Dad and I speak about every 2 weeks. The calls are short and careful. Our relationship isn't fixed, but it's under construction. And right now, slow progress is enough. Ruth comes over for dinner every Thursday night. She's been teaching me how to arrange flowers. I'm terrible at it. She says that's exactly the point. I also transferred my mother's apartment lease entirely into her own name. Karen guided me through the paperwork. 30 days notice, new application, cosigner removed. There is no longer a single financial connection between me and anyone else in my family. No shared lease. No shared credit. No shared signatures. Before everything ended, I left my mother a voicemail with 3 simple statements she has never responded to. I will not lend my name to anyone. I will not lend my credit to anyone. And I will not lend my silence to anyone. Not anymore. I still haven't bought a house yet. My credit probably needs another year before I qualify again. But the plan is alive. Different numbers, different timing, but the same dream of a small house and a dogwood tree in the yard. On my refrigerator, there are 2 things now. A printed photo of a house listing that reminds me where I'm going, and my father's handwritten note reminding me what it costs when good people stay silent for too long. Both pieces of paper are staying right where they are. I didn't share this story because I wanted to teach anyone a lesson. I'm a nurse, not a preacher. I shared it because I stayed silent for 14 months, and that silence almost cost me everything. My credit. My future home, my sense of reality. If you're sitting somewhere right now carrying a secret that someone else forced you to carry, I want you to remember one thing. Protecting yourself is not betrayal. It never was. That's my story. Thank you for staying all the way to the end. It honestly means more than you might realize. If this story feels familiar to you or reminds you of someone in your life, feel free to share your thoughts. And if you know someone who might need to hear this story, send it to them. Sometimes the truth only needs one brave voice to finally come out.